Yesterday the Prime Minister made various statements. One of those statements is about the flexible hours of employment, as if it's a brand new idea, something never been thought of before on the political agenda. I know many people involved in various government departments who are involved in what's called job sharing. Is that not, in fact, what the Prime Minister's been talking about, or at least one version of it? I can recall in 1969 I spoke with an employer of mine and I asked if I could have a different start and finish time, purely and simply because other things that I was doing, and that was so arranged. When I was going to university in the 1980s, I asked an employer of mine if I could start work quite early, 3 a.m, so that I would be able to be finished work in time to go to university in the afternoon. There has been many times and many occasions that I have seen people working these flexible hours, some with job sharing where somebody might work 2 days or 3 days a week and the other person worked those other days. There are some people who work broken shifts purely and simply so they can make sure that the child is picked up from school or taken to school. There have been many arrangements that people have done over the years. There are some businesses and some departments, government departments, that do not like these arrangements, that's for sure. It may not suit their particular purposes. Some particular businesses are very inflexible. But I have found that if you happen to have a good relationship with your employer, the likelihood of you being able to make a flexible work arrangement, that is high at that time. It seems to me that what we should be encouraging is employees to be the best worker they can be, make themselves to be as valuable as they possibly can to their employer, so that their employer will want them. And when something arises that's going to create a problem, whether it be a particular special day when perhaps some event is occurring which they believe is important that they attend, or whether it be the fact that there is a regular event that's occurring, perhaps like studies or other sorts of things that may be happening. It could be, as has always been the case in many people's lives, when their children are young, wanting to spend time with their children. These things can be arranged if you are a good employee and the employer has a direct connection with you. Sure, there'll be some people who will always want to get more than their pound of flesh. But my concern is not so much what the Prime Minister did say, it's rather what she didn't. The fact that she's saying that a person has the right to ask. The last I heard, this is a free country, and we always have the right to ask. Just the same as anybody can ask of any question of any person, and that person can, yes or no, can be a good answer. There are other answers in between the yes and the no. When the Prime Minister says, as if she's giving a brand new right to people, it must be because there is something more to it. So the question is, what is in the bottom drawer? I note that the Greens have already come out and simply said that it needs to be strong, it needs to be legislated, there needs to be a whole array of rules about how and why a person can force the employer to do what they want. Let me put it here quite categorically. There are some businesses where it is really not intelligent for the business to have your workforce all over the shop being unsure when they're going to be there or not. Sometimes you need to have that continuity of a single person dealing with a particular matter because of the variety of business. Sometimes the hours, it's impossible to change them much because of a whole bunch of other regulations as well. But if it is conceivably possible for your hours to be changed or altered, or your job to be shared with another person, and it's not going to affect the continuity of the business, most reasonable employers would be today willing to do that for their good employees. And there does not need to be a prime ministerial statement in regard to it, even a prime ministerial word of encouragement into that area. But the problem is, as rightly suggested by the Business Chamber, what they're concerned about is whether there's going to be more regulations, more paperwork needing to be done, whether there's going to be more procedures that have to be followed, whether or not they are going to lose charge of their hiring and firing arrangements. We need to have businesses working fair in this country. We need businesses to be able to work well with their employees. We need to have employees working well for their employers. And within all of that, we need to make sure the rights of both are being protected and not one unfairly over the other. My concern is that there is something more to it that we're not being told. I don't know that there's anything new being said by what the Prime Minister has said, but I do know, if it's worthy of a prime ministerial announcement, there probably is something new that we're not being told. And it comes down to the word of trust. That's simply the position. We've got to ask ourselves, how well do we trust this Prime Minister? Was it not this particular Prime Minister who said there will be no carbon tax under a government that I will lead? I understand we have a carbon tax. And it seems to me that she's been leading the government, unless, of course, she's prepared to concede that somebody else has been, and she's just sitting there in the chair of the Prime Minister while it's being led by somebody else. You see, when you make a statement, as the Prime Minister did, and you make it sound like it is something new, you ought to bring forward a program of how it's going to be delivered. If it is something that's been an extended new right, then the Prime Minister must have some means to make sure it's going to happen. Perhaps she's going to make new regulations. I don't know. Nobody does. And that's the vital question we've got to push the Prime Minister at every time we can. What has she in mind that we don't know about in regard to flexible employment hours? Thank you.